listening to the Jboy Show, your number one source for Auburn and the SEC.
My goal was to run through his soul and grab his heart when I run through his soul. Kurt, Nate, Coach Staff, those are memories.
I think we've established ourselves as, I think, the premier conference in college football.
Now, the SEC is better at the top. It's better in the middle.
The Southeastern Conference remains the premier conference.
Takes the snap. Looking for the receiver. He's got Lutz and Kirkland. Touchdown, Auburn!
Think about it. It's always been the SEC and everybody else trying to catch it.
I think this is probably the best league from a competitive venue standpoint.
Most capable teams. You just look at those programs, the way they recruit, how they invest.
Snap to Burrow. 3 steps. Fires. Back corner of the end zone. Over the shoulder catch. Did he hold on? He did. Justin Jefferson. Touchdown, Tiger.
And now, your host, Jboy.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another edition of the Jboy Show. We're very excited to be joined by another very special guest. He runs thebigspur.com. He's got the Big Spur Pod. He's been a national recruiting analyst and just an all-around good guy and knowledgeable guy, and that's JC Shurburtt. JC, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Hey, great to be with you, man.
Definitely, and I want to jump right into it, and just living in the hypothetical that we're playing 2020. You know, I've been optimistic about it. Kind of looking at the SEC, you know, as a guy that's covered it, you know, as long as you have, and been able to kind of see the ebbs and flows of the way the conference is going into this year, with all the COVID stuff being, you know, put to the side. How do you kind of see it right now? Kind of starting in the East and moving to the West, if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about playing a full schedule, you know, that's one conversation. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't either.
I think that, like, at this point, you know, you take what you get. I think it's going to be a 10-game schedule. Mm-hmm. And you're going to see the division games at the front, and then you're going to see cross-division, and then you're going to see the ACC, SEC things. Like in Auburn's case, it'd be North Carolina. In Mississippi State's case, it'd be NC State, and then the rivalries like Georgia Tech, et cetera. But if we're just looking at the teams, I think LSU, I buy the fact that because they were one of the best teams in college football history last year, nobody saw it coming. I think they have the confidence to go out there and win some games. Are they going to be as dominant? No. And that's the fly, I think, in Texas A&M's ointment in the West, because this is A&M's year. You know, I mean, they've got a senior quarterback. They've got 18 starters back on both sides of the ball. It's Jimbo Fisher's 3rd year. They've been pointing to this year. The schedule's not that bad, you know. And so you kind of look at it and you're like, well, that could be a situation where, you know, is A&M going to be second or is it going to be LSU? Whatever. I think Bama obviously is the favorite. But, you know, you look at that and you look at the confidence they built last year, and Ed Orgeron, you know, he's bless his heart, he's not backing down. You know?
No.
And they had so much turnover, but I do think because of how last year ended, that team, although they won't be as talented, will have some confidence to beat some people. And so that's the thing, how I see it in the West. In the East, I hear a lot about Florida, you know, and look, I've been a Florida doubter, you know, and then Mullen goes 21-5. But if you watch that team play, they find a way to go win. I mean, it's not like the Florida under Spurrier or Urban where they would just blow people out. It's a situation where they get behind and they're going to come back and win, and that's different for them. But you got to kind of give them credit. But man, Georgia's defense is so good.
So good.
You know, it's probably the best defense in college football coming back, and so you have to kind of look at that and be like, well, you compare this roster, this 2 deep with Florida's, and you're like, well, you got to say Georgia's the favorite yet again. And I'm not coming off of that. You know, no offense to these folks that want to predict Florida to win or whatever, but I think when you look at the facts, you got to say Georgia's the favorite in the East.
Yeah, and until somebody kind of knocks them from that mantle, I think Kyle Trask is a guy that can do enough with a Dan Mullen offense. They're going to be super athletic on defense, and I think it's going to obviously come down to those two teams. When I look at the West, I hear A&M. I'm one of those guys, and like you, it's you got to see it before you believe it. I just look at last year, and they did some good things offensively, but I look at Kellen Mond in big games. The offense puts up 20 against Auburn. You put up 13 against Georgia, 7 against LSU. And they gave up a lot of points. I think there's as much to look at on the defensive side in big games as there is on the offensive. And like you said, Alabama is going to be the coup du jour to say and have to be knocked off the top. But it's very interesting to me to see the dynamic behind Alabama right now, because I understand LSU's talented. They are going to have a drop-off from last year. It's just I think that Texas A&M LSU game, like you said, is going to be one that defines both their seasons.
Yeah, look at the history of A&M's program. They are South Carolina, had South Carolina stayed in the ACC.
That's a great comp. I absolutely love that comp, JC.
Look at it, look at what they've accomplished. Now, like South Carolina, you look at them and you're like, there's no reason why this program should be, 6-6 every year.
Yeah.
But it was like that, and I think they got a false sense of security when they came in with Manziel. They beat Bama in Tuscaloosa. They routed Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. But that was one of those years where they had a special player. It's kind of like Missouri. I mean, I think both of those teams are coming back down to earth a little bit. Look, I love the Aggies, and I hope this is their breakthrough year, because they're spending a bunch of money.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are.
Jimbo Fisher. But I'm telling you, it's not like Auburn's going away. It's not like LSU's going away. It's not like Alabama's going away. And then you have Mike Leach sitting there at Mississippi State with a transfer quarterback that was a starter in the Pac-12 that can run his offense, and he has more athleticism than he's ever had in his career. So you got to think they're going to do some good. And then Ole Miss, nobody talks about Matt Luke and the recruiting job he did, but they've got talent.
Yeah.
Ole Miss has talent. Arkansas is going to be better too.
They'll play hard. Arkansas will play hard, I guarantee you, with Coach Pittman.
Pittman was not a bad hire if you look at
I've said that I thought him and Drinkwitz may have been the two best hires.
I don't know about Drinkwitz, man. I got to disagree.
Let's
inherited a loaded program at App State for 1 year and lost some games he shouldn't have. I know they beat North Carolina, South Carolina. Great, good for him, but I don't know about that.
The reason
you got to prove it to me.
Oh, again, and they all do, but I look at it and I think he's an energy guy, and that's what Missouri needs. They don't need another guy that's kind of the status quo, and they need a guy that in recruiting can go in there with some confidence, that can get guys excited to play. Now, will Missouri ever be anything in the SEC football wise? I actually highly doubt it. If Drew Lock can't do it, I don't know who else can. But
it depends on Drinkwitz. If he goes and wins 8 games this year with that team, and they do have Sean Robinson, who transferred from TCU, who I think is very talented.
He is a good player.
But it's different. Gary Pinkel was the best coach in the modern era that they've had.
Oh, but hands down,
and he did a great job. And so Barry Odom replaces him, and Barry, literally, I thought he got a raw deal.
Yeah.
I think at Arkansas, you had to fire Chad Morris. You can't lose to Western Kentucky at home.
No.
45-19 with a quarterback that you ran off. You can't do that at Arkansas. But Barry Odom was kind of a surprise. I think their AD is a clown, to be honest with you. And he went with Drinkwitz. He could have hired Skip Holtz, could have hired Blake Anderson, and he didn't. And so he went on a ledge there, and that's who they got. So we'll see what happens with them.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting story to follow. I know a lot of people that think really highly of Eli, but my question to you, we were talking about Auburn, And, the biggest question obviously around town is, how will the offensive line gel with so much inexperience? There's some talented personnel there. You lose some guys on defense like Derek Brown, Noah Igbenani. So there will be a drop-off in defense, but there is talent. Kind of, JC, how do you see Auburn right now? And do you see them being able to challenge Alabama for the West?
It's Auburn. Okay, so 2014, I thought Auburn was going to win the national.
Yeah.
And then that was that year Mississippi State was unseasonably good and Ole Miss was good.
Yeah, that's why I thought the apocalypse was going to happen, actually.
And then there's always Bama. I think it's one of those hit or miss seasons. I could see Gus Malzahn going 10-2, winning the West. I could see him going 4-8.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. I'll tell you this, DJ Williams, I love that kid. I think that kid could have a breakout year at running back. I think Auburn, the key with Auburn is the run game always. Malzahn's offense is predicated on that. I think Bo Nix doesn't get the credit he deserves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's going to be even better this year. So on offense, I think they're going to do all right. Defensively, you lost a lot of players, but, Auburn's recruited really well, and they've got guys coming back. So that's what happens with good programs, and Auburn is one. And so how much of a drop-off on defense is my question.
Yeah, that is a big one, and it's one that obviously you're anticipating some. I mean, I don't think Derek Brown was appreciated enough, as crazy as that sounds. If you really go back and watch the tape, what he could do to an opposing offense at that position. Yeah. But
what Will Muschamp, and I'm a South Carolina guy.
Oh yeah,
Will Muschamp did for that defense in 1 year recruiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a good haul.
Yeah.
That was a good haul for sure. But how do you see Chad Morris? We kind of talked on him earlier. Do you see Chad actually being able to put a stamp on the Auburn offense? It actually be visible to see during the game?
Nah, the same thing. I mean, and what's unfortunate about it, in my opinion, I don't think it was a bad hire. Is that Chad? If you look at his offenses at Clemson, SMU, and Arkansas, they're not physical. The Clemson's problem when he was the OC there was they would run into physical teams. They didn't lose often, but they would lose to Florida State. They'd lose to South Carolina. And it wasn't because, Spurrier or Jimbo were dialing up these great plays. It was because that offense, would run into the teeth of a defense that was pretty good. And so that's my question. I mean, and that's been the question, no matter who's calling plays on, Chip Lindsey, whoever. Gus needs to run Gus's running game, okay? That running game has been proven to be lethal when you get the blocking and you have the talent in the backfield. And so is Chad going to be able to help that? That's my question. Now, passing game-wise, I think it's going to be a big boost.
That's where most Auburn fans are looking right now. That's a great point.
But you have to be able to run it and all that. And so, that's my question about Chad Morris. And look, that was a great hire because it's Chad Morris, But Gus, honestly, I've always believed since 2013, since he took the job, Auburn is at its best when Gus Malzahn is running Gus Malzahn's offense.
Yeah, and it's something to where, again, it all comes down to up front. And when Auburn has an offensive line that's able to execute, you see the results. It's the getting stuck in having an offensive line that is not as good as the one in the past or that can't get it done. And it would be nice to have a security blanket if that doesn't work to be able to still move the ball consistently. And I think that's the Chad Morris effect in the passing game of being able to utilize the tight end more now, being able because
run the quarterback
the quarterback, man. I've said it. It's crazy. Jason,
look, if you have a bad offensive line, if you run the quarterback, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Look, I go back to like the mid-2000s and Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia with Pat White. Their offensive line wasn't all that good, but they would cut people because their quarterback could run. And I think you look back on Jarrett Stidham in that era, and Auburn was the best team in the country for 4 weeks. And then they had some injuries at running back, ran into Georgia at the Dome, whatever. But that they finally got Stidham out of the pocket, got him moving and all that good stuff. And I just think that when Auburn can run the quarterback, you can't stop them. I mean, you know, and that's my key is we got to get if I were an Auburn fan, I'm saying that we got to get Bo Nix out of the pocket and let him run the football.
Yeah, and it's crazy you say that. A couple weeks ago on the show, I was doing a breakdown, kind of a numbers crunch, and during the Gus Malzahn era, it just shows you how it kind of goes hand in hand. When the quarterback throughout the course of a season rushes for 350 yards or more at Auburn, he's like 35-4. When he rushes for 349 or less, Auburn's like 21-16.
That's the key, man. Yep. I mean, and it's not. It really has. I know Auburn people are always griping about the offensive line. It's really not that. It's do you have a running threat at quarterback, and do you have the gumption to call those plays? I mean, and I think Gus, when Jarrett was there at times, he was hesitant to do that. And I believe that Auburn, if you look at the history, I mean, and we have 10 years of history now, going back to 2010. When you run the quarterback at Auburn, you cannot be stopped.
No, that's the truth. Man, it's the truth. Look at Nick Marshall. I mean, there were a few crazy things that happened there, but, Nick Marshall wasn't exactly Tom Brady in the pocket, but he didn't have to be.
Well, think about that Georgia game where he hit the long pass to Ricardo Lewis. I mean, if he hadn't been running all over him the whole game, would that guy have one-on-one coverage? No.
Yeah. It's such an.
Think about this.
Yeah.
Auburn people got to think about this.
It's such a. You can't account for it. You really can't if he can do it, especially. And there's nothing more demoralizing. And I've been a part of it where it's 3rd and 13. He drops back. Everybody's covered. You're in your Russian lanes. It's all looking good, looking like a punt, and he squirts out of there and somehow gets to 13.5. So it just demoralizes you.
And in South Carolina, we got a guy like that named Connor Shaw. I mean, and the great Steve Spurrier was calling plays. Yeah. He drop back and run out 9-10 yards, and get the first down. So it's very beneficial. And I think in that system, you got to be able to run it. From the quarterback.
Without a doubt, yeah, I agree 100%. And you bring up South Carolina, JC. Obviously, you can find JC at thebigspur.com and check out the Big Spur Pod. And also his with the guy we just had on the JC and Morgan podcast with Mike Morgan. But, talking about South Carolina, you return most of the offensive line. There's some guys on the defensive line that are coming back. Obviously you lose Javon Kinlaw, who actually coached a year in JUCO at Jones County. But
you did. And what a great person!
What an unbelievable person, and what a humongous person.
I actually love Javon Kinlaw.
Oh, he's one of the coolest. He's one of the coolest people ever. I text him every now and then, but I'm just glad he's doing good. So. You return most of the offensive line. You have a few defensive linemen coming back and some defenders that have experience and have had success. You have a quarterback that, I think can get it done if it all goes right. How do you see?
He may not be the quarterback.
Yeah, and that's my next question. How do you feel South Carolina is right now in kind of that limbo world?
All right, so let me just roll through the Will Muschamp era at Florida and South Carolina. Took over for Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer's on record as saying, like, the 2010 recruiting class that he signed, which was numerically better than any class in history per 24/7 Sports until like Bama's class last year. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're talking about like 2 decades best class ever. Those guys were a bunch of they didn't like to work, bad locker room. Okay. So he leaves. Will takes that over. He's got John Brantley at quarterback. He hired Charlie Weiss, which was a disaster.
Yep.
And Charlie started Brantley over Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett transfers, whatever. So he's rolling in his 4th year. He's got Kurt Roper there, who's not that good. However, they redshirted Will Grier, who's a good player, and they're sitting there. They beat Georgia. They come play South Carolina. That South Carolina team in the whole Spurrier era had never blocked a kick. I mean, they blocked a punt and a field goal, and beat them in the swamp in overtime, and he gets fired. All right, so goes to Auburn. You know, he got a lot of players down there. So he takes the South Carolina job. He's replacing Steve Spurrier in South Carolina. All right, so at the same time, Kirby Smart takes Georgia. They play for a national title. We know what's happening at Clemson, you know. It's a bad time to be the South Carolina football coach in a rebuilding year. Last year, his starting quarterback gets hurt first game of the season.
Yeah, tough.
And so Jay goes out, and then you got to start Helinski, and then he's had terrible offensive coordinator hires since he was at Florida. Now, he finally made a good one.
I agree.
Mike Bobo.
I've said that publicly.
And then he brought in Colin Hill from Colorado State. Colin Hill's an in-state guy. He's from Dorman High School in Spartanburg. And he may be the guy. Helinski may be the guy. And then they got a freshman, Luke Doty, who could be the guy. And so, and then you bring in a new OC, and a global pandemic hits.
Yeah.
So you can't practice. I mean, Will Muschamp is the most unlucky coach in the history of college football. And he coaches the most unlucky program in the history of college.
It's so funny because everybody thinks their program's the most unlucky. I could tell you so many Auburn fans, they're like, we're the most unlucky. And I'm like, you guys don't realize how good you have it.
Compare that to South Carolina. I mean, come on.
That's hilarious.
But you know, I mean, it's one of those things. So do I think they could be good? Yes. Depending on how the schedule works out. I mean, if it's 10 games and then 8 SEC plus 2 ACC, I mean, you know. That's
tough. That's a tough draw.
A lot of Gamecocks are hoping for Wake Forest. Personally, I think they should play North Carolina. I think they're better than North Carolina.
Yeah.
And they could beat them. And then there's Clemson. So it's just a bad time to be the coach of South Carolina right now.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Tennessee won 6 straight games at the end of last year. And so it's tough. But I do think Will could turn it around. I just wish that Bobo, you know, had the spring and, you know.
At least everybody had to go through it. At least everybody. At least it wasn't just, I could see if the pandemic just hit South Carolina, then I could totally see that'd be about the most unlucky thing that ever happened to Muschamp.
I mean, think about Will Muschamp. It's like, he's coaching at Florida. He's safe with his job. They beat Georgia, whatever. And then South Carolina, a walk-on blocked those 2 kicks.
Yeah.
And then he loses. And Spurrier was even like, well, I feel bad for Will. Well, good job, you know.
That's a pretty good impression, man. We actually, when I was at South, we played up at South Carolina. It was a great atmosphere. And I actually talked to him a second before the game, and I couldn't realize, I know he's older, but I couldn't realize how much smaller he was than what I thought.
Yeah, he's a real skinny guy. He works out, unlike me.
Yeah,
I guess fatter about the moment, but you know, he works out, and he actually liked living in South Carolina.
I bet he did. The golf's good up there, man.
When he got the job, I was kind of, because Lou Holtz, when he was there, Holtz would spend half the year in Orlando, Florida, and then fly back. Or he's kind of a part-time coach, but Spurrier embraced it. And he's like, well, these people, you know, here in South Carolina, they like NASCAR and country music. and his wife got a degree while he was there. It was all good. But,
yeah, that's hilarious. How was
that turned out better than I thought.
I got to tell you something hilarious, man. My Lou Holtz story.
Yeah,
he used to. My dad was telling me this story. This recruit told him one time he was recruiting against Lou Holtz, and the recruit told him, he was like, "Yeah, I went to one of his camps, and he was talking all of us. You know, he talked like this, you know." And he said he started talking. I just started laughing, and he said, He said, I just started laughing. I couldn't help it. And he said, Lou Holtz kind of looked at him, whatever. And he said he tried to stop. And then he said he started talking again. He started laughing. Lou Holtz kicked him out of the camp.
All right, so here's the story. I'm going to tell you and your listeners of South Carolina.
Please do.
All right, so I say we. It's the Gamecocks. It's no secret. I love the Gamecocks. So we had this receiver named Matthew Thomas. Matthew Thomas was extremely talented, but was kind of a head case, right? And so they're practicing, they kicked him out of practice. And Matthew, and then at the time at South Carolina, you had like the stadium and the practice fields, and you had to walk back to the locker room. So Matthew Thomas has his helmet off, he's walking back. And so they're running offense, and Skip Holtz was the OC at the time, and then like they call play and it didn't go so well. And Lou Holtz goes in there, he's like, 34 goals, you can't do this, 34 goals. And Skip was like, Coach, we have not installed 34 gold at South Carolina. It's a Notre Dame place. But if you want to, we will do that right now. And Lou took his hat and he slammed it down on the ground and he walked away and got in the golf cart and drove back toward the stadium, right? He just practiced. And then Matthew Thomas walked down the street and he stopped and he picked up Matthew Thomas and got in the golf cart and just like rolled away.
He kicked himself out of practice. That's hilarious, man. That is that. I appreciate that.
Lou Holtz did more for the Gamecocks than people ever know. I mean, you guys know we don't play Auburn that often. And 97, Terry Bowden, who I love, came into town, and Brad Scott was our coach, and 23-6. Brad. Hey, I was at that game. I took one of my ex-girlfriends to that game. She's married to one of my best friends now.
Oh, but, good. You all right?
She was from Connecticut, and I got her to be a Gamecock guy, but
there you go.
Her husband is now too. But anyway, they were on hiatus, so whatever.
Yeah.
This was 97 and 23-6. Now the year before 96, Carolina was up on the Plains. And we lost 28-24. And then it's been heartbreaking. The 2011 Auburn, South Carolina is the worst day of my life. No, because I met this girl and that same day, and it was bad.
Yeah.
I'm divorced, single man, Wish I hadn't met that one.
Yeah, we all have those.
And Clemson beat Virginia Tech in Blacksburg that night. It was like,
yeah.
But that's 16, and Michael Dwyer,
you're right, Dyer.
40 carries that day, 16-13. Garcia, who's still a first.
Oh God, he was a disaster. That's when the ball kept flying out of his hand.
No, dude, it was so bad, and then Carolina had to put on these different uniforms and stuff. And I mean, look, South Carolina that year, 2011, was a better team than Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I agree.
But Auburn just has always had Carolina's numbers, so that's why I'm against the Auburn movement to go to the East.
Yeah, let me ask you: do South Carolina fans hate Auburn?
No. They hate Georgia and Clemson. And
what about North Carolina?
Tennessee is like the number 3.
Okay, that surprises me because I always thought it'd be interesting because on South Carolina, who do you hate more? Clemson, yeah, because they're in South Carolina, but then you have North Carolina, which I would think if there was any arch enemy of South Carolina, it would probably be North Carolina, like a little Korea situation.
No, look, last year losing to the Tar Heels is a disaster. I mean, you can't. Before they lost that game, South Carolina had not lost to a team from North Carolina since 1999.
Wow.
Lou Holtz's first year when they went 0-11, but South Carolina was in the ACC from 1953 to 1971. But if you think about it now, Carolina's been in the SEC since 1992.
Yeah.
So it's almost twice as long.
Yeah.
And no, I think South Carolina people, it's Georgia, it's Clemson, because we've always played them, forever. And then if there's a third team, it's Tennessee. Because you think about this in the 90s. Tennessee won a national championship in 1998.
Yep.
With 5 starters.
Yeah.
From the state of South Carolina.
But yeah. That's crazy.
Philip Fulmer, he was good. He was good at doing that. And Knoxville's not a far drive from Columbia or most places. So.
That's true. That's a good point.
Tennessee is probably number 3, but no, we don't hate Auburn. I mean, it's we don't play often enough.
Yeah, that's a good point.
At the same time, I mean, at some point, South Carolina needs to beat Auburn.
Well, we are kind of in basketball, kind of like we're kind of Final Four Eskimo bros a little bit.
Different story.
Yeah, but
because look, I mean, think about the SEC in basketball. Has Kentucky been to the Final Four in the last 5 years?
No, I can't remember.
So what teams have?
Yeah, I know.
Auburn and the Gamecocks.
That's right. It's crazy.
So, yeah.
But man, well, JC, I really appreciate you coming on. Tell everybody where they can find you. You're a great follow and where they can hear you.
All right. So I want to tell all your listeners to go download the JC and Morgan College Football Podcast because it's not. I'm not going to talk about the Gamecocks there the whole time. Me and Mike Morgan from SEC Network, ESPN. We and actually Mike has some scoop about this season. Because he works for and he's an Auburn guy, and he likes Auburn.
Yeah, Mike had a lot of nice things to say about Auburn.
Yeah, so, but I know your audience isn't just Auburn. I know it's all over the place.
Yeah, we try and mix up a little bit, and again, you're a guy like I said that you covered all of it, and now kind of up in there in South Carolina doing your thing, man. But we got to have you back, man, once we get the season going.
Yeah, it'll be great, man. I appreciate you, man.
JC, you too, man. Let's stay in touch.
Take care, brother.
All right, buddy. You too. And that's JC Shurburtt. Used to be the lead expert when it came to recruiting for 247, and you've seen him kind of everywhere. And just a guy I really appreciate coming on the show. Obviously, you can find the Big Spur Pod, and obviously you can find it at thebigspur.com. Him and Mike Morgan, who we had on the show, just two great guys. Really interesting takes there, and I agree with some of them, some I don't. Me and him are kind of on the different sides of the fence on Eli Drinkwitz, but that's what makes it fun. He's, like I said, just a really good dude, and I appreciate him coming on. As always, appreciate you. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at the Jboy Show. Again, you can find us on YouTube. Just go to the Jboy Show. You can text JBOY to 90407. That's JBOY to 90407 and get the earliest predictions before anybody else gets them. Shout out to IBN Sports, the best PR team in the game, and Faison in the studio doing his thing. You are the best. It's another edition of the Jboy Show, and Jboy's gone.